I've been in this game for over 7 decades now, and I've watched millions of hardworking Americans make the same devastating mistakes over and over again. And here's what keeps me up at night. It's not the stock market crashes. It's not the economic recessions. It's watching good people, people who work harder than I ever did, systematically destroy their financial futures without even realizing it. I'm 94 years old, and I still live in the same house I bought in 1958 for $31,500. I've never spent more than $25 on a haircut. And yet, I see folks earning decent salaries, $50,000, $75,000, even $100,000 a year, ending up broke, anxious, and unprepared for retirement. Why? Because they've been sold a lie about what wealth really means. Today, I'm going to share something I've never fully laid out before: the 8 biggest financial mistakes that are quietly bankrupting the middle class. These aren't just numbers and theories, these are the exact patterns I've observed in ordinary Americans that separate those who build wealth from those who stay trapped in the rat race. And I promise you, by the end of this, you'll never look at your money the same way again. The foundation of financial destruction. Let me start with something that might upset you. Most of what you've been taught about money is wrong, dead wrong. And the people who taught you weren't trying to mislead you, they simply didn't know any better because they were making the same mistakes themselves. Mistake Hashon, confusing income with wealth. This is the granddaddy of all financial mistakes, and it's everywhere. I can't tell you how many people I've met who think that because they're making $80,000 or $100,000 a year, they're wealthy. Let me be crystal clear. Income is not wealth. Wealth is what you keep, not what you make. I know janitors who became millionaires and doctors who went bankrupt. The difference? The janitor understood that it's not about how much comes in, it's about how much stays in and grows. I've said this a million times. Do not save what is left after spending. Instead, spend what is left after saving. Here's the brutal truth. If you're making $100,000 a year, but spending $98,000, you're not wealthy, you're 2 paychecks away from disaster. But if you're making $45,000 and saving $15,000, you're building real wealth. The math is simple, but somehow we've convinced ourselves that the fancy car and the bigger house are signs of success. They're not. They're signs of spending. I drive a 2014 Cadillac XTS. Could I afford a Rolls-Royce? 100 of them? Sure. But why would I? A car's job is to get you from point A to point B safely. Anything beyond that is your ego talking, not your wallet. Mistake #2, buying things to impress people who don't care. Now this one hits home because I see it everywhere and it breaks my heart. People are working themselves into the ground to buy things they don't need, with money they don't have, to impress people they don't even like. Let me tell you a story. Back in the 1960 seconds, I was already worth millions, but I still used coupons at the grocery store. My kids didn't have the latest toys. We took modest vacations. People in Omaha thought I was cheap. Maybe I was. But you know what? I was building compound interest while they were building debt. The middle class has been sold this idea that success means displaying success. The bigger house in the better neighborhood. The luxury SUV with all the bells and whistles. Designer clothes, expensive watches, premium everything, and every single one of these purchases is screaming to the world, "Look at me, I'm successful." But here's the thing, truly wealthy people don't need to announce their wealth. I calculated something once that scared even me. If an average family redirected just the money they spend on status symbols, the car upgrade they didn't need, the bigger house than necessary, the brand name everything, and instead invested it in a simple index fund, they'd retire millionaires. Not might, would, but we can't do it. Why? Because we're terrified of what the neighbors will think. We're afraid we'll be judged as failures if we don't keep up. Let me tell you something. Your neighbors are drowning in the same debt you are, pretending just as hard as you are. It's financial theater, and everyone's acting in a play that ends in bankruptcy. Mistake #3, treating debt as a tool instead of a disease. Oh boy, this one gets me fired up. Somewhere along the way, we convinced ourselves that debt is normal, that it's just a tool for building wealth. Credit cards, car loans, home equity lines, student loans, it's all just part of the game, right? Wrong. Dead wrong. Debt is not a tool. It's a trap. It's a ball and chain that keeps you running on the hamster wheel, working harder and harder just to stay in the same place. And the worst part? The system is designed to keep you there. Let me break this down in plain English. When you borrow money, you're essentially becoming a slave to your lender. You're promising them your future earnings, your time, your freedom. Every dollar you owe is a dollar you'll have to work for in the future, except now you're working for the bank, not yourself. I've never borrowed money to buy stocks. Never. Not once in over 70 years of investing. You know why? Because debt eliminates your margin of safety. It turns small mistakes into catastrophes. When the market dropped 50% in 2008, I didn't lose sleep because I didn't owe anybody anything. But millions of Americans lost everything because they were leveraged to the hilt. The average American household carries over $100,000 in debt when you include mortgages. Add in credit cards, car loans, and student debt, and you've got families spending 40%, 50%, sometimes 60% of their income just on debt payments. That's not building wealth. That's treading water while someone holds your head under. Here's my rule, and it's never failed me. If you can't afford to buy it twice, you can't afford to buy it once. Could I have borrowed money over the years to accelerate my investments? Sure. But I sleep like a baby at night knowing I don't owe anyone a dime. Peace of mind is worth more than compound interest on borrowed money. Mistake #4, ignoring the power of time. This might be the most tragic mistake of all because it's the one that can't be fixed. Time is the investor's greatest asset, and the middle class is throwing it away like it's worthless. Albert Einstein supposedly called compound interest the eighth wonder of the world. I don't know if he actually said that, but whoever did was absolutely right. The problem is compound interest needs time to work its magic, and most people don't start investing until they're 35, 40, even 50 years old. Let me show you what I mean. The psychology of financial self-sabotage. Let me show you what I mean with some numbers that'll make you sick. If a 5-year-old invests just $5,000 a year, that's about $417 a month, and earns a 10% average return, by age 65, they'll have $2.2 million. But if they wait until they're 35 to start, same $5,000 a year, same return, they'll have only $822,000. That 10-year delay cost them $1.4 million. 10 years. That's the price of procrastination. But here's what actually happens. The 5-year-old says, I'm young. I've got time. I'll start investing when I'm making more money. Then they're 35 and saying, I've got kids now, a mortgage, I can't afford to invest. Then they're 45 and panicking because they have nothing saved. Then they're 55 and working with a financial advisor who's trying to perform miracles with 15 years and no foundation to build on. I started investing when I was 11 years old. 11. And even then, I felt like I'd started too late. Why? Because I understood something that most people never grasp. In investing, time is more valuable than money. You can always make more money. You can never make more time. Mistake hash 5. Chasing returns instead of avoiding losses. Now we're getting into the territory where the middle class really gets slaughtered and they don't even know it's happening. Everyone wants to hit the home run. Everyone wants to find the next Apple, the next Amazon, the next Bitcoin. And in that chase, they make decisions that destroy decades of wealth building in months. I've got 2 rules of investing. Rule hash own, never lose money. Rule hash 2, never forget rule hash own. Sounds simple, right? But nobody follows it. You know why? Because avoiding losses is boring. It doesn't make for exciting dinner party conversation. Nobody brags about the money they didn't lose. But here's the math that nobody wants to face. If you lose 50% of your money, you need a 100% return just to break even. Let me say that again. If you lose half your money, you need to double what's left just to get back to zero. And yet I watch people every single day taking enormous risks with money they can't afford to lose, chasing returns they don't need, in investments they don't understand. The middle class got destroyed in 2000 with the dot-com bubble. They got destroyed again in 2008 with the housing crisis. And you know what happened in 2021 to 2022? They got destroyed again with cryptocurrencies and meme stocks. Same story, different decade. People see their neighbors making money and they panic. They think they're missing out. So they jump in at exactly the wrong time with money they need for retirement into investments they know nothing about. I've been through every market crash since 1942. Every single one. And you know what I learned? The people who get rich aren't the ones chasing the highest returns. They're the ones who avoid the catastrophic losses. It's not sexy, it's not exciting, but it works. Mistake hash 6. Paying for financial advice that makes you poorer. This one makes my blood boil because it's legalized theft, and nobody seems to care. The financial services industry has convinced the middle class that they need professionals to manage their money. And then those professionals proceed to charge fees that guarantee the middle class will never build significant wealth. Let me break down the scam. The average actively managed mutual fund charges about 1% per year in fees. Doesn't sound like much, right? Wrong. Over a 40-year investing career, that 1% fee will consume roughly 30% of your total returns. Let me say that in plain English, your financial advisor is taking 1/3 of your retirement. But it gets worse. Study after study has shown that after fees, about 85% of actively managed funds underperform the market. So you're not just paying them to take your money, you're paying them to lose to a simple index fund that charges 0.03% per year. I've been saying for decades, put your money in a low-cost S&P 500 index fund and forget about it. But nobody wants to hear that. Why? Because it's too simple. It doesn't require a relationship with a financial advisor. It doesn't give you someone to blame when the market goes down. It doesn't make you feel sophisticated. So instead, people pay 1%, 1.5%, sometimes 2% per year to advisors who are statistically likely to underperform an index fund you could have bought yourself in 10 minutes online. And these fees compound against you for decades. I made a bet 10 years ago with a group of hedge fund managers. I said a simple S&P 500 index fund would outperform their picks over 10 years after fees. They laughed at me. Guess who won? The index fund beat them all, and it wasn't even close. But people are still lining up to pay these fees because it feels good to have someone managing their money. Mistake hash 7, treating your home as an investment. Oh boy, here we go. This is the sacred cow nobody wants to touch. But I'm going to say it, your home is not an investment. It's a place to live. And the sooner the middle class understands this distinction, the sooner they'll stop making catastrophic financial decisions. Let me be clear, I'm not saying don't buy a home. I own my home. I've lived in it for 67 years. But I didn't buy it as an investment. I bought it as a place to raise my family. There's a huge difference. Here's what happens. People buy the biggest house they can afford, or more often, can't quite afford. They stretch themselves thin with a massive mortgage. Then they tell themselves it's okay because real estate always goes up, right? It's an investment. Except it's not. A house doesn't generate income, it consumes it. Maintenance, taxes, insurance, utilities, repairs, it all adds up. The average American spends about 35% of their income on housing. That's money that could be invested in actual assets that generate returns. And then there's the leverage trap. People borrow 5, 6, 7 times their annual income to buy a house, and they think that's normal. It's not normal, it's insane. In 2008, this mentality destroyed millions of families. People who had good jobs, who were doing everything right, lost everything because they were over-leveraged on an asset they couldn't afford. I live in a house I bought for $31,500. Could I afford a mansion? A compound? Sure, but why? My house has 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, and about 6,570 square feet. It's plenty. Everything else is ego. The path forward and the ultimate truth. Everything else is ego. And ego is expensive. Every dollar you spend on a house beyond what you actually need is a dollar that's not working for you in the market, compounding, building real wealth. The middle class has been sold this American dream that's really an American nightmare, the idea that you're not successful unless you own the biggest house you can possibly afford. Here's what I tell young people. Buy a house you can pay off in 15 years or less, ideally on a mortgage that takes no more than 25% of your take-home pay. Everyone looks at me like I'm crazy. Warren, that's impossible. Houses are too expensive. And my response is always the same. Then buy a smaller house or rent until you can afford it. Because the alternative, stretching yourself thin for 30 years on a house you can barely afford, is financial suicide. Mistake hash height. Failing to invest in yourself. Now we get to the mistake that underlies all the others. And this is the one I wish I could go back and scream at every 20-year-old, every 30-year-old, every person who still has time to make a difference. The biggest investment you'll ever make isn't in stocks, bonds, or real estate. It's in yourself. Your earning power is your greatest asset. Period. If you're 25 years old, you've got 40 years of earnings ahead of you. Let's say you make $50,000 a year. That's $2 million in lifetime earnings, not adjusted for raises or inflation. But if you invest in yourself, learn new skills, become more valuable, move up in your career, and increase your earning power by just 20%, that's an extra $400,000 over your lifetime. And that's conservative. But here's what the middle class does instead. They buy stuff. They spend money on things that lose value the moment they buy them. A new car depreciates 20% the second you drive it off the lot. But a course that teaches you a valuable skill, a certification that makes you more employable, a book that changes how you think about money, those things appreciate forever. I've spent my entire life reading and learning. I still spend about 5 to 6 hours a day reading. At 94 years old, I'm still investing in my mind. Why? Because knowledge compounds just like interest. Everything you learn builds on everything else you've learned. The person who reads one book on investing understands more than the person who reads none. The person who reads 50 books understands exponentially more than the person who reads 10. But I watch people spend $200 on shoes without blinking, then balk at spending $20 on a book that could change their financial future. They'll drop $50 on dinner and drinks, but won't invest $50 in an online course. They'll waste hours every night on social media, but won't spend 30 minutes learning about compound interest. Your mind is the most powerful wealth-building tool you'll ever own. Feed it, train it, invest in it. Everything else flows from that. The hard truth nobody wants to hear. Now, I've given you 8 mistakes, but here's the underlying truth that connects all of them. The middle class is financially struggling not because they don't make enough money, but because they've adopted the spending habits of the rich without the income to support it. We live in a world where you can look rich or be rich, but most people can't do both. The middle class has chosen to look rich. They want the lifestyle, the status symbols, the comfort, the convenience, and they want it now. But wealth isn't built on consumption. It's built on patience, discipline, and delayed gratification. I could have lived in a mansion my entire life. I could have worn $5,000 suits. I could have eaten at 5-star restaurants every night. But I chose differently. Not because I'm cheap, well, maybe a little, but because I understood something fundamental. Every dollar you spend is a dollar that can't compound for you. Every purchase is a choice between consumption today and wealth tomorrow. The middle class is making the wrong choice over and over and over. And the tragic part? Many of them don't even realize they have a choice. They think debt is normal. They think spending everything they make is normal. They think starting to save in their 40s is normal. It might be common, but it's not normal, at least not if you want to build wealth. What you need to do starting today. So what's the solution? How do you break out of this trap? It's actually simpler than you think, but it requires something most people aren't willing to give: short-term sacrifice for long-term gain. First, stop trying to impress people. Stop caring what your neighbors think. Stop measuring your success by what you own and start measuring it by what you keep. The fancy car can wait. The bigger house can wait. Your financial freedom can't. Second, get out of debt and stay out of debt. I don't care if it takes you 5 years or 10 years. Pay off your credit cards. Pay off your car loans. Pay off everything except maybe your mortgage, and then attack that too. Debt is the enemy of wealth. You cannot build a fortune while you're paying interest to banks. Third, start investing today, not tomorrow, not next month, not when you get that raise or when the kids are grown or when things settle down. Today, even if it's just $50 a month, even if it's just $20, start the habit, start the discipline, start the compound interest clock. Time is running, whether you're investing or not. Fourth, educate yourself. Read everything you can about money, investing, and wealth building. Learn from people who've actually built wealth, not people who are trying to sell you something. Knowledge is the only investment that pays dividends forever. And finally, and this is the most important one, live below your means. Not at your means, below them. Significantly below them. If you make $60,000, live like you make $40,000 and invest the difference. If you make $100,000, live like you make $70,000. This is the secret that separates wealth builders from everyone else. My final words to you. I'm 94 years old. I've lived through 17 recessions, multiple wars, countless market crashes, and every financial crisis you can imagine. And through it all, I've watched the same pattern repeat itself. People who understand these principles build wealth. People who ignore them struggle. The 8 mistakes I've shared with you today are destroying the financial futures of millions of good, hard-working people. But here's the beautiful thing. Every single one of these mistakes is completely within your control to fix. You don't need to be smarter. You don't need a higher income. You don't need luck or connections or special opportunities. You just need to make different choices than the people around you are making. You need to be willing to look less successful than you are while you're building real wealth. You need to have the courage to say no to consumption and yes to compound interest. The middle class doesn't have to stay in the middle. The path to wealth isn't mysterious or complicated, but it does require you to swim against the current, to resist the pressure to keep up, to delay gratification in ways that most people simply won't do. The question is, will you be one of the few who does, or will you be one of the many who looks back at 65 and wishes they'd started at 25 or 35 or 45? The choice is yours. It always has been. Make it count.